Welcome to QuickBooks at Kapiolani Community College. In this video, we'll go over Chapter 7 that deals with payables, purchases, and inventory for a merchandising business. First thing to note is that company preferences for a merchandising company are different than they were back in Chapters 1 through 5. You have to turn on items and inventory, which were done earlier, but you're probably only going to be noticing now. You go to the gear icon and pick companies and settings, and then sales, and then make sure that you check the option to track quantity on hand and click save. Now purchase orders are a new thing for you. You have to turn on purchase orders, and you do that by choosing the gear icon, company and settings, and then also expenses, and then to the right you want to edit expenses and select that you want to use purchase orders. You also might want to check at that same time to check off custom transaction numbers so that you can alter the numbers of your purchase orders if need be. So purchase orders initiate the purchasing process. They help link inventory to accounts payable and to keep track of your merchandise in all of its status from the point of needing to be ordered all the way through to having been received. Once you've entered an item into a purchase order, the items, the quantities, the amounts are going to flow to the accounts payable process through one of these two ways. You pick up as expenses and then vendors, and then select the open purchase order and copy to a bill, or you can use the plus icon for a new transaction, vendors, bill, and then pick the open purchase order and add that to the bill. So once you pay the bills, the purchase cycle will be complete. Here's a chart that explains how that works. So your inventory to accounts payable linkage can be done manually through an item detail on a bill, but it's more systematic to enter your inventory items through purchase order even if the PO documents aren't actually sent out to the vendors. This helps you update the status of your inventory to be on order, and it also helps you cut down on accidental duplicate orders. Also keeps accounts payable and inventory asset account in sync so that you don't have transaction errors in either of them. And you can see the various statuses of the different purchase order states here in this chart. Once you've entered a purchase order, it looks like a journal entry, but it's really not. Let's say, for example, we go to products and services and we determine that we're out of stock on some of our merchandise or low on stock and need to reorder. Let's take a look here at these items that say that they're below the reorder point, which is something you can enter in there to have your system remind you when it's time to do an order. So we go here and we say reorder, and at that point in time the reorder will generate for us a purchase order. Now if we know which vendor we want to purchase from, we can go ahead and complete the purchase order and then send to the vendor to initiate the purchasing process. You can see the purchase orders that are currently awaiting receipt of merchandise by going to review expenses and purchases and asking for this open purchase order list by vendor. The follow-up sequence to this involves either coming at it from the purchase order angle. That would mean going, for example, here and saying I want to copy this to a bill, or coming at it from the bill angle that you've received from the vendor who sent you the merchandise, and then to select the purchase order on the side indicating that you've received the merchandise for that particular purchase order. So the order process is then complete. Anyway, once you've actually entered a purchase order, you'll see that the purchase order in your books looks like it's a journal entry, but it's really not. In other words, it'll show that something has happened and it'll show that something has been debited and credited, but the accounts really would not have been. It'll just trying to keep its place in your system, indicating that a transaction or almost transaction has occurred. So if you try to find the purchase orders account, the account's not really a posting account. So things you can do again to follow up on it: if you have the inventory shipment and the vendor invoice that come in at the same time, whether it's both one or the other, the journal entry just comes out the same because QuickBooks inventory is very unsophisticated. It'll debit merchandise inventory and it'll change the accounts, the purchase order credit that you used to have, to accounts payable for the name of the vendor instead. If you receive only the merchandise shipment with no invoice, you're going to have to fake it and enter a fake vendor invoice, and that'll update your quantity on hand. And so your system will be using basically your estimated inventory cost under FIFO. So the journal entry looks the same. And when the actual invoice actually shows up, you're going to have to edit the previous fake invoice to reflect the actual amount that really got billed. Now if you get only the vendor invoice and you don't have any merchandise, and you want your accounts payable to be updated, you're going to have to enter the bill. But when this new bill is entered, the system will show that your purchase order existed for the vendor, and you can say add that to the bill. Otherwise, you might accidentally enter the same thing twice. The drawback of this is the on-hand quantity will be increased even though your items haven't actually been received. So one solution is, not really a solution, is to hold off on entering the invoice, so you won't be updating your accounts payable yet, and you'll enter it only when the item of the shipment has actually been received. If only part of your merchandise order is received, it's even tougher. QuickBooks Online doesn't handle this situation well at all. So once you receive any quantity of the purchase order that's not the full quantity, QuickBooks will, once you say you've received it, QuickBooks will show the status as closed. So to keep part of the purchase order open, you have to copy the purchase order, delete the lines that aren't received, and select that duplicate purchase order for the bill that's coming in for the partial shipment. Then you have to go back to the original purchase order and delete the lines that were received so that you'll have an original purchase order with the items that were on order and not yet received still remaining. Other issues: credit memos and vendor discounts. If a credit memo is entered, we can go to bills and click the credit radio button to start a credit memo, and it'll say you're entering a credit. And on the items tab, we want to make sure the items are actually relieved from inventory. So the accounting impact of this is that it'll decrease both accounts payable and inventory by debiting accounts payable, crediting the asset account inventory. Other issues that are tricky: if a vendor gets an early payment, gives you an early payment discount on your inventory purchase, then you can use the merchandise discounts account. This is a cost of goods sold sub account. It's actually a contra type account and should be subtracted from cost of goods sold on the income statement. You have to actually calculate the amount and enter it on a bill as a negative amount, and then you can go ahead and pay the net amount of cash payment that's required to pay to the vendor. So the payment itself won't reflect the discount, only the bill itself. If you get vendor discounts on non-inventory purchases and payments, then you can use what the author suggests is the purchase discount account, and that's a contra operating expense account. Again, you have to calculate the amount and enter it on the bill as a negative amount. Most people don't actually use an account like this in practice. So I hope this helps. Good luck with Chapter 7.